Gael has, whilst Docker takes to start, to explain what sampler is.
What?
What's sampler, Gael?
I don't know. No, sampler is a module that I wrote a while ago just to be able to create modules and then automate some tasks. When you have a module, you have functions, you want to merge them together into a PSM one, then you want to do some things with it, like creating a changelog, publishing a changelog, publishing your module build to the PowerShell gallery, but before that, obviously running the test and all of those things.
So you did carry on. Keep talking.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay.
Don't worry about that.
No, okay. So that's what sampler is about. So in the previous session, we've seen the basics, why would you want to do this, the basics of you define what module dependencies that you have to build your module on everything. When you start the build, it will make sure that it can resolve those dependencies, and then it will pull them from the gallery, put them into your output folder, and then change your PS module path environment variable, so then it will find those modules. And then once you find those modules, you can do whatever you want. So you can have the task that we provide with sampler. You can have some other tasks like DSA resource.test, which makes sure that you have script analyzer rules that are compliant, otherwise you would fail, these kind of things. So that's what we've saw in a high level view. And now we're going to do like some more examples about how it is used in real life and the kind of things you can do with it. And it's easier now to go a bit more deep dive. So if you have questions or areas you want to go into, then we can show you that. Because sampler we show you for a module, but sampler basically is also controlling your environment. So you can use that into your, say, CI/CD tool to just run things that you have in dependencies. So it will automatically, if it's say you define a task, which is make sure all my users have the right email address in my Active Directory, you can just have your commands built into a module, and then you say build, run the task, check user ID, email addresses, and then if you define that task, that call whatever module you wanted, it will just run that for you. So you can use it to build a module, but you can use it to do anything. We use it, or I use it. What are you doing?
You keep going.
Oh, yeah. So I use it to create, as an example, to build machine configuration packages. I use it to build Chocolaty packages, or I use it to build modules. And I use it to run some scripts in the CI/CD tools to make sure some things are compliant. Or sometimes to just run, okay, I want to get all the modules in the Chocolaty repository, or the NuGet packages in the Chocolaty repository, and I want to internalize them like you would do with the Chocolaty for Business. So with Chocolaty for Business, you have a command that you can run, which is Chocolaty internalize your module. I can just have a script that does that with some dependencies, put that into sampler, run that into my CI/CD tool. So you have many, many use cases for that. Should I talk some more?
No, you're good. We'll just do a control plus.
Yeah.
Somebody take a picture and tag April in that and tell her that I'm running it in CodeSpaces.
Okay.
Oh, look, CodeSpaces. Whee. So I could be running this in CodeSpaces. So not only have I just spun it up on locally, I'm spun it up in GitHub as well, just because we can. No, we don't want that one. No, we don't want that one. And no, we don't want that one. So there was a question about how easy is it to set up a module and put it into make use of sampler. So this is DBHX, and DBHX is a module that we run, and that has that we moved from not using sampler to using sampler. And what did I do? I took the code that I had within DBHX and I put it into this source folder. So I'd run new-sampler module.
New sample module.
New sampler module, which will done all the plaster, create all the framework, give me all of this stuff. And then I've then gone to my existing module and I've moved all of my code into this source folder. Apart from these bits, because these were generated. Okay? So I didn't have to worry about those at all. I moved all of my tests into the test folder. I took a load of them out because I had a load of trouble, but we started there with them all in there. I went into things like required modules. Okay, so we were talking about this, required modules, the modules that we need to be able to develop in our project, not necessarily the definition of what we need, go away. And then I put in all of these. And as you can see, we are making use of the latest version of DBA Tools. Latest version of DBA Tools means that we need DBA Tools library. DBA Tools library means that you get this message in ASCII from Chrissy, because the reason we need a DBA Tools library is because Microsoft have changed the way that we encrypt connections to SQL Server. So we have to make sure that we're able to separate this out. And it gave us a chance to start to split DBA Tools into smaller component parts, because there are many hundreds of functions, and it begins to get a lot. So we did that. I think pretty much. PS Framework is also a DBA checks dependency. So we put this in here, and then we had some PS script analyzer settings. So I already had a whole bundle of script analyzer things. You can see I put comments in all the time because Pesta. There's the stuff that we need to hear. What versions are we targeting? I had a make docs pipeline task already. So at the moment, we still make use of that. So I had to move that into here. Code of conduct, changelog, contributing, moved those ones over. The build docs is the thing that does the building. And we put our license in, and then we get to Git version. Mm-hmm. So we talked about our Git version file. So this is a place I think you're going to do a bit more talk about this later on.
If you want to.
Yeah. The thing that we put into here was that our next major version was going to be 3.0.0, which is the one that we're working on the sessions on tomorrow, by taking Pesta to v5 and the challenges that we've got there. So we say that we've got preview. This annoys me, but it's unchangeable at the moment, is that we've got, it says branch as master, but actually we use main. And that was all in that file. And then we went to the build.yaml. So build.yaml is where we define what it is that is going to be called for our build tasks. So it's where we understand what it is that we're going to have in our workflow. So within here, I'm not entirely sure everything that we changed. We changed our convert Pesta coverage. We don't publish our wiki content at the moment. And then we went into our Pesta configuration. So because we're looking at a lot of things within Pesta, we're using Pesta to test a Pesta framework module. So you can imagine that we get a load of fun in some of that. We have our output path and our output format so that we could get the results of those tests and have them displayed within our GitHub Actions, or Azure DevOps would do the same as well. We removed all the DSC stuff because we don't need DSC because DBA checks. And then put this GitHub configuration in. So it's kind of fun. Yeah. So when my pipeline is running, I think we've got a PAT token for our DBA checks pipeline that runs, and then we just make sure that we add in with the Beard Autobot and this configured user email. This is what we're doing, and this should be false, shouldn't it? Update changelog on pre-release.
It's up to you. It depends how you want to update your.
So that was what we did for a generic module. Now, of course, I like to take things a step or seven further on than that. So I've got a developing directory within our GitHub repo, which is telling us how we set things up. It's got a how do we do that? If we do a control K and a control KV, then we can see what that one looks like. So, we've got some information of how people to do stuff. Tells you, look, run .build.ps1. The things you saw in the first hour. This is the things that you would find in here, because then I know that you can get everything set up in the same way here. And we have some containers. So I said, this is running inside a dev container, so I can ensure, absolutely guarantee that it doesn't matter where you are, you can go and use it. And if everything falls over, I've got a code space running. If this machine falls over, I'll just log on to GitHub over here, and I'll still have this code space. So it's a little bit of a backup for me. And in my containers directory, I've got my base container, I've got a second and a third. Third is a Docker file from this base image. We'll install PowerShell and we'll install Git and then just clean up some stuff. In our second one, literally the same, except that we're using a different image. And then in the first one, we do a little bit more. So the first one is from SQL Instance 1. There was a while when the original DBA tools version 1.1.145, I think it was, oh, it is in there, look. I should read what's in front of me, was in the image. And when we tried to load DBA tools 2, for some reason this container, it wasn't working. So we had to just mess about with that to make it work. And then we copy over a profile so that we've got some control of what's going on. And then we make sure we're installing PowerShell. And it's the latest one, please. So you'll have noticed when this dev container span up, go away, it did things like this. So it says load profile for full profile. Oh, okay. Let's try that. Load profile. So I've controlled my profile file. I've created a profile, and now I've moved it into my container so that whenever I run, I get what I want to, what I expect. So that means that I can control what my prompt looks like. Feels like a silly thing, but it's an absolutely control of where my world is. Oops. And because we're extremely sensible in DBA checks, and Jess and I never like to play tricks on each other, I've got this, whatever this one is, meow meow, what am I going to do next? Because both of us have got cats and we like to be silly. And Claudio just thinks that we're daft. But this is a silly thing, but it is designed to make our development environment something that we're comfortable working in. Here's another thing that we do to make sure that our development environment is something we're comfortable working in, is we use our dev container. So our dev container is controlled by our dev container JSON. Docker Compose basically says spin up these 3 containers, link them together so that we know what they are, so that I can develop knowing how to do something, and so that I can run my tests and everything, my environment is set up. But actually there's more than that, because what I also want to do is I want to make sure that I've got all of the extensions that I need and none of the ones that I don't need, just to bloat the thing and get in the way. So I have things that we like our Git graph, which will sit down here. It just shows pretty pictures. Oh, we're going to depend on the internet now. I'll come back to that in a minute. We've got an error lens just to track through where our errors are, and a spell checker. But also, we've got, look at all of those settings that we control. Because what we want to be able to do is, we're having great fun where there's the script analyzer rule about trim white space on the end of the lines. Yeah, you can set a formatting rule to automatically trim the white space off the end of the lines. So then your script analyzer rule is fine. I had it set on my Visual Studio Code. Jess set it because I told her about it. Claudio didn't have it set. So when he was making his changes, he was failing all the tests because every time he saved a file, it kept the white space on the end of the line. He's like, oh, do I have to go through and change all of these? And I'm like, well, I don't. And then we worked it out. By adding it into here to our dev container definition, that meant that he always had the same experience that we had. And therefore our environment is completely controlled. So this is awesome, it's all good stuff. You just keep adding it to make it work as you wish. And then what we can do once we've got all of that is we could look at our workflows, which means I can make some changes to DBA checks. Is that right?
No changes.
I had to make Gael insist remind me that I am not allowed to make any changes because tomorrow we are going to make some changes, and Jess has set it all up properly. And if I break it, it wouldn't go well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how this thing works for us by showing it to you. So I use GitHub Actions. These are just YAML files. We set up some environment variables, and then we do our different stages. You saw the picture in the first session, and what we do is we say, check out the code, please. Install Git version. Evaluate what the next version is. That's what that Git version file is used to base on. And then I'd like you to build and package the module by running a PowerShell core script. And the script is .build.ps1 result dependency tasks pack. Hang on a minute. It's just like we're running it at the command line, because it's just like we're running it at the command line. And then we've got our Git version number through, and then we just do a publish. Okay, great. I'm just going to publish it with this. Build artifact name and our build folder name. They came from here in our environment variables. And once we've done that, if that succeeds, then we'll go and do some tests in parallel, please. So I'm going to test on Linux. I'm going to test on Windows Core. I'm going to test on Windows PowerShell 5. And I'm going to test on a Mac. And then I'm not going to test on a Mac because I can't get it to load on a Mac. But that's what we would do. And then we bring back our results into code coverage. These depend on all of these tasks underneath. Get off there. And then we get our test artifacts. We publish our test results no matter what. We set the color for our badges on the front of our repository so that anybody that comes and looks can see what's been happening. And that's just what all of this stuff is underneath. And then when we've done that, we can then just deploy. Now here's another thing. This is kind of cool, because once we've published our release, that literally says just do a build and a task of publish. It goes and does a publish. It'll create me a GitHub release. It'll check whether I've got a tag. If I've updated the tag, then it will deploy to the PowerShell gallery as a proper release and deploy a proper release to GitHub release. If I haven't changed the tag, then it deploys it with a preview.
Well, what's a GitHub release?
The question was, what is a GitHub release? And a GitHub release is a artifact that you have published, which is available for download from GitHub. And if you go to a DBA checks or any GitHub repo that does this, you can see here on the right, we've got our releases. It says the latest is 2.0.18 that was released on November 25. Okay. Surely Rob's done some work on this since November 25. Oh, look, there we go. Automatically, we have all of our preview versions of DBA checks ready, automatically marked as a pre-release without even thinking about it. If you went to the PowerShell gallery, you would see the same thing. But then we get even better. Okay? Because remember I said I'm running everything here in a container. So all of my containers need to have all of this updated code. So I merge my main branch back into my containers branch, which lives alongside. Those are always kept in parallel with main. And then I have, well, what happens if I change my containers? What happens if DBA Tools has done a new release of 2.0 and we need to work out how to add that into the image? Create a new image. I push it into the changes. This then, on push, for my containers branch, if the change is in any of these files, that's stuff to do with the containers, what we're going to do is we're going to bump version and push tag. So it's a bit like the Git version thing, but actually we're just going with whatever our latest version is. And then we just keep moving up. We'll do a Docker build. We'll push our new containers up into the Docker hub, and then we'll do a find and replace in our Docker compose file and add in the new tag. So we've now made the change in our containers branch. That has got the change of all our containers. It's updated the tag for our Docker Compose so that it can build those. But we need to get that back into main. So we will create ourselves a pull request automatically to go back into main with a skip CI so that we don't actually go and deploy a preview version of anything for a container change, and pass that changes back into everything. So this has taken it a step further than a step further and a step further, in that it's enabled us to have control over our environment, to make sure that we're keeping all of our source control in place without having to get into it. And isn't that what automation is all about? So that was me, and that was him. Anybody got any questions on that? Because that's a bit like, oof, end of the day when it's hot. That's a good one, isn't it?
So that went much further than before. So we'll go just a little bit back. What happened? You started with a module.
I did.
And then from your module, you use your module to be able to use that module into your environment where you run your tests, and then you can develop in there. You make sure that you have all the required resources to change, to load this, and then to connect to it just from having a module. So then you can have a small environment with everything that you can test with, play with, develop in. And then when you make your changes and you're happy with it, it just goes through your pipeline again and automatically integrate with the release that you've defined into your GitHub Actions. So that's the very advanced use case for Sampler, but you can do in many other ways. But that's a great example of how you would integrate something that I didn't design it for that purpose, but because it's just building a module, if you integrate, and you can integrate this just with PowerShell. So the beauty that you've seen, everything that it runs for the module is the build.ps1 and then calling the tasks.
I will not look at that PR. That is for tomorrow. I must not look at that PR. It is for tomorrow.
Don't press anything. Just not going to be happy.
But what I would like to do is just quickly show you that we have a new check. So a new check was added to our code. Jess has run a check. She's made sure that we've got some issues, which we understood. This is the output. We'll talk about a lot more of this before. And then what we have is, where is our checks gone? There are our checks. So we have our checks, and you can see that we've run a package module. We've run our Linux checks, just to prove. These are the PowerShell, these are the Pesta checks results within Sampler that you can see here. So we've run 2,200 tests here. Let's Control++ that a little bit, just to make sure that everything is as we're happy with on all of the OSs, which is why we can just say, we just push the main, we don't care. Sampler takes care of making sure preview's all done. Pesta takes care of making sure everything's as it should be. And away we go. And once that's all finished, if we look at our actions, you can see, don't look at that. Don't look at that, Rob.
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it. You must not touch it. Let's look at the deploy module one, because that would be the one that would deploy the module, surprisingly enough. What that's going to do is make sure that we pull all of those things and deploy our module. And deploying the module has published a release. And the published release, there you go, publish module to the PowerShell gallery. And also,
this is the task that we define in Sampler, in just calling this task. That's the same output that I showed you from my laptop, but this one is for the publishing.
So if you don't want to set up your GitHub Actions, you want a little bit more control over that. How are you going to run that? It's really easy because you've seen it already. If we look at this deploy modules file, all we're doing is .build.ps1 task, not that one. I'm looking at that. .build.ps1 -tasks publish. And that is what is doing all the publish. The rest of it is just taken care of by Sampler. Neat, huh?
And basically, when you call build.ps1 dash tasks dash publish, this is calling some tasks that make sure that the module is there. It's got a version that kind of makes sense. Make sure we have the changelog, and then it will do the PowerShell command publish dash module to the PowerShell gallery. We just add some wrapping around it to make sure it looks for the right thing with the right information to it.
I've gone slightly more than 20 minutes, mate.
That's all right. So, first of all, do you have any question while I get set up? No question? Any things you would like to go deeper or would like to understand a bit more?
I have a question about changelog. Is it written by hand, or are you using, for example, Git commit?
So the question is, Gael, how do we do changelog? Is it done by GitHub commit messages or Git commit messages?
My reaction was, because it's a very good question. No, we don't use Git commit messages because then because if you just do commit messages, you're not really addressing the problem. So what is a changelog? Let's go back a little bit. A changelog is for a user to know what has changed since the last time you had, let's say a new version or new pre-release version. A commit message is a bit different as to what has changed at a point in time, and that might not, you may have many commits between two versions. So you're managing slightly different things, and it's more like a developer type of logs of things that happen. If you have very good, very mature developers that really take care about each commits to make sense, then you can probably do something like that, but I would not recommend it.
Everybody's laughing at you, Gael.
Why?
Everybody's laughing at you, Gael, because you were talking about all of these experiences and committed developers who wrote great commit messages.
So so what we're using instead is there's a standard which is called keep a changelog. So they say, well, if you have a changelog and you want to follow a given format, you follow this standard, which is quite loose, but then at the same time there's very specific categories. And then you say, well, when is this version created? Thinking. Yeah, like this. Oops, there you go. So keep a changelog. Let me just go remove the. So keep a changelog.com. And then they say, well, you have different categories. You say unreleased mean you have, stacked a few changes, but you haven't released it yet. So then if someone adds some more things they're still working on, adding commits and merging those commits to main, but not creating a new release. That's what we're using in the DSC community as an example. We just add, preview. We're not changing the main changelog because they're only previews. But then when we go to a new full release version, we just take everything that is in the unreleased section and say, well, you were in 3.2.4, now you go to 4.0.0. This is everything that changed. So we look at everything in the changelog, and we use the changelog management module to do that. We're not doing this by hand. It's automatically done for us. Everything within unrelease is taken care of and then published into the GitHub release and also the PowerShell gallery. So if I go to the PowerShellGallery.com, and I can look at anything from the DSC community, but we look at SQL, Server, DSC. I got there. I like this one because you will see why. So this is the DSC community logo. Let me go a bit further. We look in there. And then if we go to the changes, version history, you see we have the previews. We have version 16. And then we have, we should have information about, I can't remember where they are. Sorry? Package details, maybe. No, where is it gone? There's a few things going on there. There we go. Release notes. So you can see that we automatically publish the release notes, which is everything that's come from the changelog. So if you just go back quickly to keep a changelog, you see they say you should maintain a changelog that looks like this. And this is what is published in the gallery to say, well, the last release was preview 4 in this case. And then this is everything that's been added, changed, fixed. So we are very consistent in the way we develop and we publish the changes. Other questions? So how do we do it? How do we make a change and how do we add the change? So every time that we want to create a pull request, there's one tester test that say, have you updated the changelog? Because if you create a pull request, you have changed something. If you have changed something, you should say what you've changed. So it's not a very clever test to understand what the change is, because you may have changed one file or many files, but it tells you, you made a change, you must update the changelog. And when we go to the changelog, so I take, it's another project, but the same principle, we have the changelog here. The changelog is, again, the same thing that we saw. There's the things in the unreleased section. And then after the unreleased section, we have the full version, the last full version that exists. And then we just have the list of those things. And that, yeah, in this case, there's a lot of things going on because this, these modules, there's quite a few things that goes on. But that's the idea. You just have a Markdown file, and then you just change the Markdown file, and people will describe what happens. And if they forget to do it, the pull request, the test won't pass, so the pull request won't be able to merge. So they reminds the developer, well, you made a change, but you didn't tell what you changed in the changelog. So people remember to do that. And they just add a new commit, push the commit, and it's done. And you see you add a commit, but the commit is just updated the changelog. That's probably not something you want to see every time in your changelog, because obviously you should update the changelog, but a commit is something like a bit different. Make sense? So if you want to do it properly on your, a good developer, what you would do is you would do a rebase interactive, you would edit all your commits, and then you go back and then you push. The push wouldn't work. You would have to push force because you change your commits. And, many people are not there and they don't want to go through the pain of using Git that deeply. So what else? Do you have other questions or things you would like to discover?
Yeah, version integrates with the changelog. Because you've got version numbers for each new entry in the changelog, and you also mention automatically incrementing the version number.
Yes. Yes, let me think first, because there's two questions in one question. Yeah. So the first question is, so the question where there's how do you manage the versions automatically, and how do you manage the version within the changelog? And basically, how does it automatically know which version to pick, how to increment it, and how to go from, 116.5 to 0.6 as an example. So with all those questions, we should look at the little tool, which is not specific to PowerShell at all, which is called Git version. So as I've showed in the previous session, when we run, let's do it again. Git version, it will automatically create a JSON string that tells me, well, this is your version. At this point in your repository, this is your version. So it calculated it based on the Git history. You can see I'm on the branch main, and then it tells me the major is 0, the minor is 116, patch 6, and then you can tell me that it tells me that I'm on preview 1 and things like that. And then you can see that what we really care about PowerShell, because of the way NuGet v2 works, we need to find the NuGet v2 version. Semver is there, but we have a NuGet version, if I can find it, NuGet pre-release tag, and NuGet version v2. That's the line we really care about, because we have a full version that works with PowerShell and the PowerShell gallery.
And that has come from the tag that has been added to the Git repository. So if we do a Git tag list, you can see that we've got that. So a human being has had to put the first tag in, has gone Git tag version 0.0.1. And then after that, Sampler using the module has just updated it for each one of those things. And when we were talking about do we choose to do a preview or a main release to GitHub and to the PowerShell gallery, if we decide that we wish to have a new release, we would go in there, a human being would go in there and say, right, look at that. The latest preview is, what was it, 0.116.1 dash preview, blah, blah, blah. Right, okay, so 0.1617, that will be our git tag. We would put that in locally. Then we would run, it would build the next thing. And then when we pushed it up, we would have to make sure that we push up the tags as well. Just a normal git push won't push up the tags. So you need to do it with a force. And that will then set off within the workflow that you have, or the pipeline that you have, if you're in Azure DevOps, it will then set off, instead of doing the publish GitHub release and publish to the gallery tasks with a preview version, it will go, haha, I know this is real, and it will go to a main version.
So how does that calculate it? There's a few rules that you can have, and you can see when to upgrade a major version, and we just created a regex that says, well, if in the commit message we have this is a breaking change or a major change, well, these words, are shown, like that's probably a breaking change. So what happens is, well, that means you need to bump the version number from 3.2.4 to 4.0.0. Then we have the same for minor and patch. And then we have some more information, so we can obviously skip it if you don't want to increase any version because you're changing something else, like just the documentation. And depending on which branch you're coming from, because when I create a feature branch, I never push directly to main. I create a small changes, and then my changes goes to a feature branch, and then the pull request is coming from there. So then it knows if that's just a convention that I use, but if I do f/, I know it's going to be a feature. If I do a fix / what I'm changing, that's going to be a patch, and then that means the increment will be on the patch part of the version. So you have a major, minor, patch. If I do a fix, it will be only the little, the patch part of the version that's going to be bumped up. So that's the idea. So you have a bit of control like this, and you configure that. We use it in one way, and then we don't really change it. Yeah, I've seen that. This is convenient. So that's the idea, and you do that. So how does it work with the changelog management now? When the changelog management, you say what you change. You don't say for which version, because you don't know which version it's going to be end up being. But then when it's merged, it will just automatically update your changelog that is being used for the publication, like in the publish task. And then it will just say, well, now we've calculated this based on the information provided in the Git repository. This is what we're going to use in the changelog, and this is what is being used when we publish it to GitHub and to the PowerShell gallery. So you don't have to manage the version at all. Only if you want to increase like the major part of the version or the minor or the patch. That's what you do. And you do that by the commit messages that you publish. So, yeah, question over there.
You make use of code tools to alleviate the onboarding time of new developers, because it's a very complete system, but do you make use of those?
So, I didn't hear the beginning of the question. Do I use?
Do you make use of code tools in Visual Studio Code? You can make like, I don't know how to
It's okay. I got you, mate. Okay. The question is, Gael, have you got code tools added into Visual Studio Code within Sampler? And the answer is no, because Sampler is about PowerShell. And although we're going to tell you absolutely use Visual Studio Code, maybe you're not going to use it. Gael, do you know what code tools are?
No.
Awesome. Perhaps I could do a thing. If you go GitHub and DBA checks. Not certain now. You have to go to /dataplat. That's the organization. And then /DBA checks. I can't come any closer because I'll go through. I'll set everything off. I haven't got a tools on there. Okay, not to worry. We were trying. What code tools does is it's an extension within an extension within Visual Studio Code that you can then go through and say, right, show this, show this, show this, show this, show this. And it is, as my friend Christian said, a fantastic, magical way of ensuring that your new developers have a visual way of exploring the code. So your documentation will say, what happens is you run sampler and you do a build task, and that'll do the build.yaml. Line 3 of build.yaml, and they click on it and it'll go to line 3 of build.yaml, and then you can follow through and explain all of the things. It is a super useful tool for bringing people on. Maybe I'll do a open stage on that. Super good. So Gael is going to do in 1 minute new sampler module destination path dot dash module type complete sample dash module author Gael Colas module name my module, because he's really bad at naming things. So I said that before. Dash module.
I said that.
Dash module description test name your default branch main. That is the correct answer. There we go. So now we're just using sampler to start from scratch. We started this session with how do we take an existing module and move it into it. That is, how do I start with a brand new module? And if we can open the right Visual Studio Code, look at all the stuff it's done. So just open a pipeline or a build YAML file. You can see it's all there ready for you to go. It's pretty neat, isn't it? In the amount of time it took me to describe what was happening, we've already got a framework built. We've already got some base tests there. We've already got our directory set up. We've already got a pipeline code ready for us to make use of. We've got all of this stuff ready. In fact, we can even upgrade Minikube if you want to. Right. So we'll do a build. There we go, look. So once we'd run that new sampler module, we've got everything there ready.
And here's the default. That's the default that comes with the type that I used. And then I go to the output. It's already trying to pull, that's PSDepen, and it keeps going as I showed in the previous session. We just created like a new module. Then if I want to carry on, so when this is finished, I would go into the repository. I would do git init. And then I would go into maybe GitHub, create my repository, git push, and that's how I get started. I push everything that has been created there. Then I go to my source. I have classes, a lot of things that we haven't got into, but there's a lot of features that you can have. If you've used PowerShell classes, if you don't use them in the PS1 file, you will have many issues. So the good thing is to create PS1 files and then merge them into the PSM1. That's also one of the reasons we're doing this way. And then you can add your public and your private functions. They're just samples there if you want to try and see how it looks like.
So my name has been Rob and his name has been Gael, and we have thoroughly enjoyed just nerding out into sampler for some time. Next up, we've got community social event.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to meet outside of the event at
20 past 6.
18:20 local time. Okay.
No.
Guess who works with databases? If you have any more questions about sampler, then please feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, I can go on for a day or two.
Yeah, which is why I stopped you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, because I can go on for 2 days as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.